If you've ever felt dismissed for how you speak more than what you say, like and subscribe. I still remember how I shrunk that day in the lab. I didn't expect to be laughed at. I expected to be challenged, maybe even underestimated. Because let's be honest, when you walk into a high-ranking Ivy League AI research lab as a brown woman with an accent and a long name that gets butchered in every group email, you learn to brace for that. But I didn't expect mockery. I arrived in Ithaca with one suitcase, 3 hard drives of data I'd collected on algorithmic harm and regional languages, and a heart full of gratitude. I had earned a slot in one of the most selective PhD cohorts in the country, and I believed, naively maybe, that brilliance would be enough. The lab was sleek, all glass walls and whiteboards, with buzzing screens full of code and models rendering ethical heat maps. But the coldest thing in the room was Dr. Finner's welcome. The first time he said my name, he tilted his head and narrowed his eyes like I was an unexpected item on a menu. Priya, right? I nodded, already rehearsing the lines I'd been taught growing up. Smile. Be grateful. Don't make a fuss. But the next time I spoke, during our first meeting, was when the quiet unraveling began. I offered an insight about linguistic bias, specifically how our model was rating English dialects as more trustworthy than non-Western phonetics, and he just blinked. Then turned to David, one of the American postdocs, and muttered, loud enough for both of us to hear, "Maybe we'll need subtitles for this part." David smirked. My heart dropped. I chuckled, trying to disguise the sting. I had been in the room 10 minutes. I started to speak less after that. Not because I didn't have things to say, I had entire notebooks of ideas, edge case flags, and corrections, but because I began second-guessing every word that came out of my mouth. Each syllable felt loaded. Was it data? Or data? Would my tone sound too assertive? Would they think I was too much? I began recording my own voice at night, practicing pitch and pronunciation like a singer before an audition. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was building fairness protocols in AI speech recognition while being ridiculed for how I spoke. The microaggressions started to build like mold in the corners, quiet, unaddressed, but spreading. Dr. Finner would only refer to me in meetings as her, never by name. When I emailed him detailed notes, I'd get one-word replies, noted. When David sent the same ideas, Dr. Finner's inbox exploded with exclamation points. I was once asked to present a component I had written from scratch, a classifier for code-switching bias and multilingual input, and during the presentation, Finner kept interrupting to clarify my words to the room. What she means is, he'd say, rewriting my thoughts in real time, white-manning my code with every sentence. I felt erased while standing right there in front of the projector. My imposter syndrome bloomed. I started wondering if maybe I was the problem, maybe I did talk too fast, or not clearly enough. I didn't even tell my parents back home. They were already worried about me being so far away and alone. So I made it sound like everything was going fine. I told them I was respected. I said that in America, as long as you worked hard, people listened. But the worst came during one of our weekly code review sessions. I had flagged an inconsistency in the system's fairness metrics. Our model was under-detecting toxicity in languages with tonal inflections, which skewed the data against Southeast Asian and African dialects. I have been working on a fix for days. I raised the issue and started walking through my findings. I was maybe 2 sentences in when Finner turned to the rest of the team and said, "Isn't it cute when she gets passionate?" The room chuckled. I froze. My throat dried up mid-sentence. I felt my dignity peeling off like old paint. And yet, no one said anything. Not David. Not Amy, the half-interested postdoc who once asked if I dreamed in English. Not even Leo, who I knew didn't agree with how I was being treated, but had perfected the art of quiet survival. I realized I was on my own. That afternoon, I stayed in the lab until 10 p.m., cleaning up everyone else's code, running redundant simulations, and fixing bugs I didn't cause, just to prove I was useful. Just to avoid being called cute again. I wasn't homesick. I was dignity sick. No one knew that I'd been top of my class back in Chennai. That I had built my first app at 15, that I'd published peer-reviewed research before I'd even touched American soil. None of that mattered here. Here, I was just her. The one who talked funny. I wish I could tell you that someone stood up for me. That an ally found their voice. That Finner got reported and HR stormed in. But no, academia doesn't work like that. Not in re-time. In academia, harm is slow, coded, and polite. It wears a smile and offers you a fellowship while stealing your credit. So I learned to take notes. I documented every contribution. I backed up every file. I emailed myself every version of my code so the timestamps could never be questioned. I kept receipts. And most importantly, I kept building. I poured myself into the work, because I knew one thing they'd never take from me: the right to be undeniable. I was quiet, but I was watching. And when the moment came that they needed me most, when everything they'd built started to collapse under the weight of their arrogance, I would be ready. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace, quiet, steady respect, and the dignity to exist in a space without having to translate my worth. But peace, as I learned, doesn't arrive by asking nicely. It comes through proof: cold, hard, undeniable results. The tipping point came on a Thursday evening in late April, right before our big demo with the National Science Foundation. We were prepping to showcase our AI model's ability to detect and mitigate racial and linguistic bias in automated decision systems. It was a huge deal. Funding was on the line, careers were at stake, and the entire lab had been rehearsing our parts like actors in a tech theater. Dr. Finner had been unusually tense that week, micromanaging every script, every slide. But his obsession with controlling the optics made him sloppy behind the scenes. The night before the demo, I logged on to review the final push to our Git repository, standard practice, and saw something that made my stomach drop. Finner had pushed a last-minute update to the core language fairness module, overriding my classifier without testing the dependencies. This patch introduced recursive bias loops in the multilingual detection layer. In plain terms, the whole damn thing was broken. If the demo ran, it would fail live, and none of them even realized it yet. I stared at the code at 1:47 a.m., my eyes burning. I could have just let it crash and watched it all go down. I was tempted, but then I remembered my name was still attached to this project, and I wasn't going to let my silence write the story for me. I emailed Finner immediately. I even attached a working fix I had written in January, one he'd previously ignored without comment. I CC'd the team. I backed it up to my own cloud. Then I waited. No reply. No thank you. Nothing. Just silence. I barely slept. The next morning, I sat in the back corner of the conference room, behind the glossy oval table, hands folded in my lap, trying to disappear. The room filled with suits, program officers from NSF, a few deans from the university, and some of Finner's colleagues from other labs. Everyone had their coffee, their notebooks, their fake smiles. Finner stood at the head, confident as ever, clicking through the slides I had helped build. When the time came to demo the live fairness model, he smiled and said, "We're very proud of what this tool can do. This next part shows our commitment to ethical language recognition." He clicked run, and nothing happened. The system stuttered, froze, then dumped a red error screen across the projection wall. The room fell deathly quiet. Finner blinked, tried to recover, hit a few keys. Another crash. David leaned forward and whispered something that made Finner's neck stiffen. Then, like a man tasting his own medicine for the first time, he looked up at the crowd, then back at our team, and for the first time in 2 years, he said my name. "Priya, can you fix this?" Not her. Not Miss ChatGPT. My name. Out loud. In front of everyone. And for a half second, I let the silence sit there, heavy and bright. Then I stood. I walked to the terminal with my flash drive already in hand, because I had known this was coming. I loaded my patched module, live-patched the dependencies, and manually restarted the bias detection layer. The model ran perfectly. Real-time fairness graphs populated the screen. Heat maps lit up with multilingual accuracy metrics. The room began to murmur, nodding, impressed. Finner tried to jump in, to narrate the success like it was his again. But then the NSF chair, a stern woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward and asked, "And who built that component?" I didn't hesitate. I looked directly at her, and at everyone in that room who had ever smirked when I spoke. That was me. The original classifier was mine. So was the fix. Finner swallowed hard. David looked down. And for once, no one laughed. No one dared. After the demo, the suits clapped. Business cards were exchanged. Some people came up to shake my hand. Finner tried to regain control, slipped into his usual arrogant rhythm, tossing around words like collaboration and team success. But the energy had shifted. The eyes in the room knew now. He'd needed me, and everyone had seen it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just packed up my flash drive, nodded politely, and left the room before the applause even stopped. Back in the hallway, Cheta, the only black postdoc in the lab, found me near the elevators. She didn't say anything at first. Just put a hand on my arm. Then she whispered, "I've been waiting for someone like you." I understood instantly. It wasn't just me. It never had been. She'd seen it too. She lived it, this subtle silencing, this tightrope of intellect and accent and patience we were always being forced to walk without ever stumbling. But today, we'd taken up space. Loudly. That night, I didn't go out to celebrate. I sat in my dorm room, laptop open, and pulled up the internal documentation system. I began backing up every piece of evidence I had of my contributions, code diffs, Slack threads, version histories, even the timestamped screenshots from before the crash. I wasn't just going to win this moment, I was going to protect the record. Because I knew Finner. I knew he'd try to reclaim the narrative in some journal article or grant proposal, reframe my fix as his mentorship. But this time, I was ready. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I had spoken, saved their work, and made sure that no one could unwrite me again. I didn't confront him. I didn't need to. After the NSF demo, something shifted, not in how Fenner treated me. He remained passive-aggressive and cold, though now more careful, but in how the room treated me. The eyes that used to glance past me now lingered with caution, sometimes respect, sometimes guilt. It didn't matter which. The spotlight had cracked open, and I wasn't stepping back into the dark. A week after the presentation, I quietly submitted a solo paper to Ethics in AI Quarterly, a rigorous breakdown of multilingual fairness models, featuring my original classifier, my design logic, and my live-patch architecture. No co-authors. No dedications. Just me. It got accepted. Fast. Then it got shared. Academic Twitter picked it up. A professor from Stanford tagged me in a thread about young researchers changing the ethics landscape. For the first time in 2 years, my inbox wasn't full of corrections or silence. It was full of invitations. Lectures. Fellowships. Recognition. Finner never congratulated me. He never even mentioned the paper. But I found out he did try to include my code in his next NSF proposal. He thought no one would notice. He renamed the module. Slight tweaks, cosmetic edits. But he underestimated me. I had receipts, commit logs, timestamps, even a Slack thread where he ignored my concerns about the bug. I submitted a quiet complaint to the university's research ethics board, attaching everything. I didn't scream. I just showed them the truth. A month later, his proposal was denied. The university didn't make a public statement, but word got around. Grants dried up. One of his collaborators pulled out. Students started requesting to work with other advisors. It wasn't explosive. It was slow, professional, permanent. That's how real accountability often happens, in the form of doors that stop opening. My final semester, MIT reached out. They offered me a postdoc position, leading my own project on bias in large language models across low-resource languages. I accepted. I packed my bags, cleared out my lab locker, and left behind the sticky note on my desk drawer where I used to scribble my name over and over just to remember it belonged in that room. Jada hugged me on the way out. "You didn't just fix code," she whispered. "You fixed the mirror." I knew what she meant. We're made to feel invisible until we leave proof in places they can't erase. And I had. As for Finner, well, the last time I saw him was in the hallway, days before I left. He passed me, nodded stiffly, and said, "Good luck, Priya." Not sarcastic, not friendly, just defeated. And for the first time, I didn't shrink. I didn't smile to make him comfortable. I just said, "You should have listened the first time."